Welcome to MindMakers. I'm John Kim, co-founder and CEO of Delight AI, AI agent from Sandberg. On this show, I talk to people building the next generation of artificial intelligence, from founders to executives to technologists, shaping the future of AI and its real-world impact. Today, I'm joined by Val Bercovici, Chief AI Officer at WEKA, the company that's enabling enterprises, neoclouds, and exascale AI innovators accelerate real-world performance. You bring a wealth of infrastructure experience onto the show today and has overseen technological evolution throughout his career, such as coordinating the migration of Google Borg into Kubernetes and officially bringing NetApp into the cloud era. It's awesome. Val, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Very good. Excited to be here, John.
Awesome. Before we go too deep into what you and your company does, I'd love to for the audience to really get to know you better. Can you share a bit about your early part of your career, your journey?
I won't go too far back, but I did start my career in Canada. The accent's Canadian, as I was telling you earlier on. Grew up in Montreal. Started working as a contractor for the Canadian federal government. Got involved in some pretty big systems pretty early on that spanned the mainframe and back then client server before cloud and all that. Yeah. Got recruited into Silicon Valley right before Y2K, moved here right after Y2K. Spent about 20 years here. A lot of time with NetApp, just watching the rise, the challenges during the dot-bomb sort of crash, and then the resurgence of a business like that was fascinating to watch. As you said, I was the early cloud czar at the company. Ended up having to leave the company because I didn't think it was pivoting to cloud fast enough and got reacquired back, ironically, unexpectedly. A small company called SolidFire. So I rejoined as CTO of NetApp and SolidFire. That's when the fun opportunity to work with the Google Borg folks. Purely following my geek instinct. No one on that team thought that Kubernetes would blow up to be as big as it's become today. But we all thought it was the right thing to do. We were all fans of containers as opposed to virtual machines from a developer perspective. We were all fans of containers in the cloud. We can go into it if you're curious. There's just a long strategy story that Google had around trying to leapfrog Amazon by being early to containers. Didn't work out because Amazon executed really well on containers as well. But Kubernetes worked out really, really well. So spent time there, worked even on early machine learning projects. Kubeflow was an early project before TensorFlow, PyTorch. Worked on that. But then I thought infrastructure, storage in particular was done. What more could you do than cool machine learning in the cloud? Went away from infrastructure for a while into cyber and other startups. And then November 22, ChatGPT happened. And that Al Pacino quote from Godfather 3, it drew me right back in.
Wow. That's awesome. Actually, I have one kind of burning question. You are the first chief AI officer we interview on this podcast. Yeah. So kind of curious about your thoughts on this title. It's obviously AI is top of mind for everyone and super important. We're starting to see a lot of our enterprise clients also have chief AI officers as a new kind of role. What's your thoughts on this role? Do you see this as a more of a really core pillar, almost like a CTO, but like a CAIO? Role that will continue to be a new kind of important pillar in one of the executive teams, or do you see more of a kind of transformational, transitional role? Maybe we'll get rolled back to the technology side of things. How do you think about this role?
It's a great question. I don't think I've been asked that question in such great detail before. So I do believe it's transitional. Like most cliches, you're really successful in your role if you work yourself out of a job. I hearken back to the days when, again, the dot-com boom, we always were talking about that in the context of a potential AI bubble. When you said you were working for an internet company in the mid-90s, that was novel, right? The internet was new. By the time that came around post Y2K, 7 years later, that was the most vague, generic thing you could possibly tell someone. I'm an internet person, right? Yeah. I think the same thing's about to happen with AI. It's going to become ubiquitous. It's becoming ubiquitous, but even more so to the point where saying I work for an AI company is kind of meaningless. What are you applying AI for? Similarly, the chief AI officer role is really essential right now because there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of myth busting that has to happen, misconceptions. Yeah. We can talk about that MIT paper that was famous last year. And so you need to educate internally. Strategy is fundamental. Nowadays, and we'll talk about how the Silicon Valley ethos of, ideas are worthless and execution is everything has been turned upside down by AI. So strategy is really essential in the role. And being able to have that technical leadership both outside and inside the company. What I'm doing today is helping really create a market category around context memory storage. It was a lonely effort. last year. Jensen Huang himself from NVIDIA really validated the market at CES at his keynote this year. So it's working.
Do you think like this role of chief AI officer is actually changing very quickly? Because to your point, probably like a year ago when we started our AI journey, a lot of people were still like scratching their heads like, well, we heard about this AI. I've been using like ChatGPT for the first time. So people are still kind of like trying to figure out what AI looks like in enterprises. But latter half of last year, we start to see customers actually adopting AI and rolling things out to production. So it's almost like, like how universe expands at the peripheral edge faster than the speed of light. So people or companies that are adopting AI are getting so far ahead, whereas the rest of the world is still kind of like lagging behind. People are starting to use ChatGPT on a day-to-day basis, but not really much beyond that. So it's like the entire ecosystem is like being stretched out. So like, how do you kind of define the role of chief AI officer? Like, where does it fit in from your vantage point when you work with customers?
As you described, I think the most important goal of the role is to make sure that you take full advantage as an organization, whether you're public sector or a private company, of all the potential that AI has to offer, which is unprecedented. It's enormous, but that's overwhelming at times. So to help demystify and to help sort through and prioritize what you should act on, what the risks are, what you can say no to, which is very important. So it's a very strategic role. And I don't think the role is changing yet. The day-to-day activities in the roles are very much changing because it's following the rapid evolution of the industry itself. The science, I always like to divide the science, which is what these models can do, and the papers that these big foundation labs publish about the models, versus the engineering, which is what the products are. So Claude Code, hyper popular product, particularly in the Bay Area and Silicon Valley.
Friend. Yep.
That's an instantiation of engineering. It's really taking the science, the capabilities of these models, and delivering real business value and really radically disrupting a particular industry of software development. And there's many more coming right now. There's obviously Manus, which is more of a general purpose version of that ended up being acquired by Meta over the holidays. And now, of course, we have to say OpenClaw, and I just love the Cambrian explosion of mainstream non-developer type innovations we're seeing, the creativity coming out of that community.
Yeah, OpenClaw was crazy. I think it was one of the fastest project to get hundreds of thousands of stars ever on GitHub, and I think I've been following or using the product since when it first came out as CloudBot.
Yes, exactly.
And then quickly changed to Moltbot. I'm like, what's happening? And the Moltbot came out, and now it's like I was trying to find a project. It's now called OpenClaw. I'm like, what's happening? Like, it's like the ecosystem is changing so quickly, and I'm really happy for kind of like the outcome they had. Now working with OpenAI, and hopefully, really kind of continue to build. Peter continues to build out this long-lasting project under the new foundation. But I think it really kind of gave a glimpse into what agentic experience really looks like for
the most mainstream example yet of the power of angels. And it's really an agent platform.
Yeah.
But people are really inspired by what it can do now for mainstream requirements.
Yeah. Before we kind of like diverge into different parts of AI, we'd love to kind of understand, what does your company actually do for a lot of audiences? I mean, we have the same experience as a B2B company. We're like known by the customers and the industry, but like really for people, the general audience or broader people who are just getting their feet wet into AI, kind of like would love for them to understand what your company does.
Absolutely. So we'll start with a more relatable mainstream example, and then we'll dive absolutely into the details. Think of if you're buying an EV, if there's a battery technology that can give you a 3,000 mile range, car today. Right.
Can I have it now?
Exactly. So we all want that, but you and I, when we're looking at buying cars, are not looking at buying batteries. We're looking at buying cars. Yeah. So WEKA is at 3,000 mile range battery right now. We work with people that sell cars to end users. So we work with neoclouds. We sell to neoclouds. We sell to their big tenants, the model labs and the inference runners, providers. Sometimes the same thing as if it happens to be OpenAI or Anthropic, for example. Yeah. So we work with that infrastructure, almost physical infrastructure part of the stack. More traditionally, if you were to ask a Gartner or a SemiAnalysis, what does WEKA do? They'd say they're a storage company that's now also offering memory solutions into the marketplace. Because memory, it turns out, if you really spend a lot of time with engineers, scientists and engineers in AI, that is the big bottleneck today, for the technical bottleneck for the industry.
So without going too deep into the company's history, so it's very interesting because storage used to be or could be considered like a commoditized infrastructure, but now with AI, and to your point around like context management and memory, all of a sudden this became like a super hot, sexy thing.
Yeah.
Was that like, do you think that was a strategic decision, just company trying to figure out how to catch the tailwind of the market? Or is there more like from architectural level that has been like been building for a long period of time, just that happened to be a perfect fit for this AI market?
Those are the two key components there. That's the personal reason why I joined WEKA is I started as a board advisor, started to understand the architecture beyond just what the outside-in perspective was from the inside out, quickly realized that this solves a first principles GPU scientific computing problem because you're always trading GPU floating point operations, flops, for memory. AI is the most successful scientific application on GPUs ever.
Yep.
And the opportunity basically to take some of the high performance benefits of WEKA, which are fairly unique, particularly as a commercial offering in the marketplace, and literally repackage the WEKA solution into also offering memory functionality. When I saw that architecture that was possible, then the strategy element kicked in and said, this is a giant bottleneck in the marketplace. At the time I joined, the AI dollars were still shifting primarily or being spent primarily on training. But it was obvious that you have to pay for this sometime. It was obvious that we were starting to use these technologies. And inference, particularly throughout 2025, as I predicted, exploded in terms of really a shift in spend in the industry.
Yeah.
And even training itself right now, with the advent of reinforcement learning, is fundamentally bottlenecked by inference during the reinforcement learning loops themselves.
Yeah.
So the strategy was very much, let's really focus on the inference market as well as the training market because that's growing much faster. Really, really big dollars. And the strategy was, what is the bottleneck that WEKA can solve? And it's a memory bottleneck. The memory wall is another name for it.
Yeah, that's like fascinating because about a year ago when we started, really building out enterprise AI agents, internally there was a hot discussion around the importance of rising importance of memory because it's very clear around context management. It's like everything feels like it's a working memory. Like AI has working memory, but it's like go to sleep, wakes up, it's like completely like forgotten everything we've ever done.
Yeah.
So people think like, oh, well, it's learning. I'm using ChatGPT and remember. It's like, well, it's still in the context, but it's not really like a long-term memory, if you will. So if you think about like human brains, we have working memory, but we have like semantic memory, episodic memory, and procedural memory. So I was kind of like wondering, how do you guys think about kind of architecting your memory structure in a way that can be useful for AI at scale? Do you borrow ideas from like neuroscience perspective? Like, how are you thinking about this architecture?
Not so much neuroscience inspired, but very much in terms of the practical application of the transformer technology and large language models, which through hybrid diffusion models now is being adopted pretty widely for images, audio, video as well. So the actual technical name for the working memory, because I do love that description of what it fundamentally is, the technical name is KV cache, key value cache. And that is a data structure of matrices, basically. And the rough math is about 100,000 tokens, 100K tokens is a pretty common large prompt or set of prompts for an agent right now. That translates to roughly a megabyte of data. As you embed that and vectorize that, essentially 10 to 20,000 dimensions, which is what we need for these large models to work their magic, that's about 50 gigabytes of memory. And not only memory, it has to, for maximum effect, for the latency we all crave, has to be that expensive, rare, high bandwidth memory that's co-packaged with the GPUs themselves for performance reasons. And it's just never enough. The models themselves are so big, the DeepSeek class and commercial OpenAI Anthropic class models are trillion parameter models now. So they hog essentially most of the memory before our working memory even gets going. Then you and I need to sort of share these GPUs to make them economical. You're just quickly out of that high bandwidth memory before you even begin. And so you have these memory hierarchies. Commonly now, as the industry matured, the inference ecosystem matured last year, it's like a bucket. You overflow from high bandwidth memory to the CPU DRAM that's shared on the motherboard across all the GPUs, and that's not enough. And so that bucket keeps spilling over into other tiers, and those become storage tiers with a pretty big gap in performance, almost a Grand Canyon of performance. Or there's ways to repackage those storage tiers as memory. And there's a couple of technical ways to do that, which WEKA implements. But the net effect now is you go from a scarcity mindset of actual infrastructure resources, memory resources in particular, to an abundance mindset. Because now you have, at least economically, 1,000 times the capacity of memory without any sacrifice in latency or throughput.
Wow. I'd be like super curious to learn from hardware perspective how you guys are actually solving this problem too. But kind of like just staying at a conceptual level for a second. If you think about how our human brains are structured, right? We basically have the model itself, but the model itself is also storage, right?
Yeah.
How our brain process. So the neuroplasticity is a lot higher with human brains, whereas the current models, how it's being built, is like you're almost like putting all the memory as part of the structure that's fairly rigid. So it's not as continuous, like the continuous learning or neuroplasticity doesn't exist as much in the model side of things. So we're kind of forcing almost like having the rigid structure as a kind of like fixed memory, if you will. And then we're kind of offloading the dynamic, more like learning memory into storage functions. Do you think that is the right architecture, or do you think the models should be a lot smaller and hopefully we figure out some kind of a different architecture where there's a greater learning, like high neuroplasticity component of storage of some sort that can mimic almost a human brain structure? If that makes sense.
The latter. So it's again another great observation. And the reality is, as powerful as these models are, they still sort of follow routines, if you will. They still have much more value in certain domains than other general purpose domains. And it's not very efficient to just run a big model for everything. And one of the things I love about the open cloud community is they've quickly figured this out, right? Like tokenomics, and I can't afford to just use Opus for everything, so I'm going to tier my models based on even the agents themselves, like routing exactly which model needs to be used. So back to your question, I do believe that just the way industries evolve, the way ultimately you have to have a gross and a net margin for an offering of this kind, we're going to see more neuroplastic, smaller models, more process accelerators are sometimes the terms for GPUs and alternative ASICs and so forth. More different kinds of accelerators. There's one that I use today out of Toronto, Canada, Thales, that is now an ASIC specific to a model.
Okay.
Right. So that, I think, is a direction we're heading in the future. And even the acquisition by NVIDIA over the holidays as well of Grok with a Q, acquihire, I should say, of Grok with a Q, a clear indication that NVIDIA now themselves see that there's going to be a spectrum of accelerators and particular models tuned for particular accelerators with specialties. And I think the most obvious example is, and this was mocked in the Super Bowl commercials, is latency. Right. So we want a natural experience with voice agents. There's enormous business benefit already. It's one of the hot enterprise use cases today is voice agents. It's got to be natural. We got to have a conversation exactly like this, got to be able to interrupt each other a bit and have almost no latency in our discussions. And that needs special models, that needs special hardware that's tuned to that.
That's super interesting, because I was looking at all these models, and I feel like we're giving birth to this baby with a giant head and all the knowledge pre-installed a little bit, but it's not able to learn a lot. So next time we want to have the baby to learn, it's like, well, we're going to go back to the lab and cook up another giant baby with bigger head and like let the baby sound smart, but it's not like picking up new things. So I love that kind of idea. And it seems like WEKA would be really in a good position as this market kind of evolved from the current giant baby head model to more of a neuroplasticity model.
Absolutely. Because fundamentally, a technical detail about us that's worth remembering is we are purely software defined. So we adapt really, really well to the hardware that we're installed on. And today there's a lot of value installing us in these big AI factories, these big AI data centers we read about, the big CapEx expenses and power and energy and water consumption. But it's software defined, so it adapts up and down, the infrastructure, hierarchy.
I guess on a related question, so because you're also a B2B company working with enterprises or clients that serves a lot of these enterprises, and the users also building with various models, like any kind of like insights you can give around how to think about, again, using memory? Because I don't think still the industry is understanding like how can memory actually benefit their business outcomes, and what does it mean from use case perspective, implementation perspective, versus like, well, we can just like connect our database to an LLM. It should just work. Like in reality, we've deployed a lot of AI agents, and it's not as simple as that. So I'm kind of curious for business people who are listening, like where does memory fit in, not conceptually, but in actual business like use cases?
Another great question. And so we should probably talk about this evolution last year from the focus on prompt engineering to the more recent focus on context engineering. It's directly tied to this discussion. It's around the fact that we're always going to have some level of scarcity in terms of the memory that the GPU can process in real time, despite other tiers available to it. And so the focus really needs to be on context engineering and understanding the science and understanding the engineering, because they're both rapidly evolving. So the science, for example, is still not very good, to your point. It's not very neuroplastic. The models don't understand memory tiers or memory hierarchies. They understand very scarce, limited memory. They continue to optimize, trading off quality, trading off accuracy for techniques, particularly around KV cache, compression, reduction, summarization. And the agent engineering, AI engineers themselves, right? They also are focusing now on this thing called compaction, where after a certain number of turns of an agent, you know this intimately, right? It's more efficient to just compact and summarize, clear up some context, and then move on. I would say today, the state of the art of engineering, and it has a long way to go, I'm excited about where it's going, is being able to essentially create copies or forks of certain contexts. So instead of summarizing and compacting, just give full context to a new sub-agent, a subtask, and let it start to evolve and fill up its context window. So this parallelization, a lot of concurrent agents, another common term is agent swarms. I've always believed that as agents really take off and become valuable, no one will be running just an agent. It'll always be a swarm of agents working in parallel concurrently. So this concurrent engineering, concurrent agent swarm engineering is something we've termed context platform engineering. Because the memory today, the biggest value of memory today is without any additional expense, without more CapEx or energy OpEx and otherwise, power cooling, you can have high level of concurrency. In a best case scenario, we estimate about 10x. You know, we haven't been able to test this at massive scale yet, but even a modest scale, we're seeing 6.5x. So another way of saying it is 550% more concurrent tokens without latency sacrifice, without any more GPU spend or any more energy spend. So it's exciting where the technology is today. DeepSeek, of course, continues to be very influential. They published a preview paper of DeepSeek 4 with this concept called Ngram, E-N-G-R-A-M. And it is the first public indication, and we're sure the big, closed commercial foundation labs, frontier labs are doing this, of awareness of memory tiers at the model level, not just at the inference server level. And so when the models now know that they just have more memory, more working memory, but again, some of it is short term, some of it is long term, it really opens up what the notion of a context window is. Really opens up what the notion of attention is, and these new kind of algorithms, radix attention, ring attention, helix attention. These new attention algorithms are going to get us much closer. It's going to be kind of very abnormal. It's not going to be very human-like, but the ability to have the baby with more experience as well as more knowledge and just be more effective over longer and longer contexts. And that's the science, I think, being pushed to the maximum era of the science where it is today. You've got, giants in the industry, Jan LeCun and others that are big believers in other model types, hybrid model types, Mamba and so forth. And that will continue to push the science into entirely new kinds of probably more efficiency in terms of processing so much information in these large contexts. And back to your original point, that'll result in, different kinds of accelerators, more fine-tuned kind of approaches, more efficient, affordable, accessible versions of the superintelligence.
Yeah. Fascinating, because I feel like even the context management, and I'm just thankful that Opus 4.6 now have a 1 million token limitation, which just makes my life easier. And I was actually one of my personal projects since end of last year was building what I call the swarm operating system, basically spinning up all the sub-agents and managing context and sharing context fairly efficiently. But I feel like that's a problem that everyone is trying to solve already, right? There's so many different frameworks, open source, that came out from a lot of these large tech companies. So everyone is trying to figure out or solve a similar problem. So assume this kind of context management gets solved. I think right now, to your point around compaction, I think a lot of people try to manage, at least on Cloud Code, to keep the context window below 40%, because after that there's the dumb zone.
That's the Dex Horn. There's a great talk about that.
And one of the tips that I heard from YC was people started telling AI, or let's say the models, some random facts, hey, my favorite color is purple, remember this. And throughout, occasionally they'll ask questions, so what is my favorite color? I was well, green. It's okay, I gotta reset this context. So
exactly,
it's almost like this tips and hacks around matching context it's almost like this unnecessary overhead, and
Yeah.
I think it's going to be solved and abstracted away. So kind of like curious, like what comes after? Let's say context management has been abstracted away by a wonderful company like you guys. It's like we don't have to think about it anymore. AI just remembers context. Still, it's a working memory.
Yeah.
What's interesting about humans' long-term memory is that it's actually fairly efficient. It's fast. We can retrieve information very, very fast, although storing it requires repetition and things like that.
Right.
But from the computer hardware perspective, actually long-term memory, if it stores in some kind of hard disk, a lot slower.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost the opposite of how human brains are working.
Yeah.
Human brains' long-term memories are fast and efficient. It's highly indexed. So what are your thoughts around how do you expand this memory from this mere 1 million token to, let's say, 1 trillion token long-term memory?
Yeah.
And what kind of like architecture, hardware, combined software can really solve that?
So we've given this a lot of thought. We actually coined a term around and called it token warehouse. So if we think of a coin, two sides of a coin, one memory discussion with AI engineers and people that focus on compaction is all around preserving that memory and that intelligence, that short-term memory in markdown files, basically, right? Or SQLite databases, Postgres, context graphs, and so forth. But they're basically pre-embedded, pre-vectorized structures, which you then continue to redundantly, vectorize and embed over and over again as they're being used in that pre-fill phase of inference, with the goal of just being able to decode them efficiently. And if you think backwards, what will it take to just always be decoding and not pre-filling, like you said, more than once when you're learning?
Yeah.
That's really the vision of a token warehouse. NVIDIA's engineers have a term for it called local pre-fill global decode. But the kinds of augmented memory technologies that WEKA has released now, in conjunction with new science, with the models being aware of that, do give you that. Because what you really want to be is in a world where once a prompt has been issued once, it's never pre-filled again. It's pre-filled the first time and kept forever. And one of the technical ways of describing that is a KV cache without eviction, or instead of eviction every few minutes or an hour, which is a maximum Anthropic lets you buy today, you can buy a week, you can buy a month, and efficiently at the same price or less. Which means you're always decoding, you're always doing the low-cost cache read from that. And some of the science bottlenecks today are it's only for a full prefix, only for the full system prompt, plus perhaps your prompt on top of it, plus perhaps your subsequent prompts. There are already research papers, a nice new startup here from University of Illinois, Tensor Mesh up in Redwood City here. They're famous for their LM Cache project in the inference server world, page attention of the LLM world. They wrote a brilliant white paper a year ago called Cache Blend, which is how to think, strive towards the goal of dividing and conquering, creating smaller and smaller prefix subsets so that you don't have to match a full prefix. You really only care about a subset of the prefix for efficiency over time. There is a bit of a trade-off in spending a bit more cross-attention GPU cycles, but it's a very worthwhile trade-off. And if nothing else, that paper is a direction of where things are going, where we can get to this pre-fill once, like local pre-fill, but global decode for as long as you want with this architecture, with effectively configuring what is called non-volatile memory express or extension NVMe drives. It really is a non-volatile memory technology, and packaging it up in a fast enough way that the GPU sees it as memory.
Wow. How do you keep up with all this research that's coming out? Because part of my challenge is, when I follow things like X, and there's so much paper that's coming out, and it's almost like attention is everything, right? I have to figure out what kind of things I got to pay attention to. And to your point, I'm sure maybe the battlefield, if you will, is slightly narrower in this space because I'm sure there are fewer people might be trying to solve this problem. But how do you kind of keep track of what paper to kind of track and which kind of application or technology to apply to WEKA? Yeah.
So this basically is part of the role of the chief AI officer. Is at this phase, and I don't know when it's going to end, but we definitely are still in this Cambrian explosion phase of new science and new engineering. A big part of my job is keeping up with these papers. It is going to conferences. It is talking to folks like you and learning a lot. I would say a one hack, and this is kind of well known in the industry because whether it was Sam Altman or someone else at OpenAI kind of said the company runs off Twitter vibes. So it turns out that Twitter is a pretty controversial place. X is a pretty controversial place. But the algorithm, more than ever now, since Nikita Byers jumped on board a few months ago, but even before that, is really good at what I call shrink wrapping around your engagement. So yes, if you click on clickbait and rage bait articles, you're going to see more of those.
Yeah.
And maybe create an account if you want to indulge in that, separate account. But if you want AI content and really well curated AI content, create an account that only engages with AI accounts you like, people you respect, the Nathan Lamberts of the world, the Dylan Patels of the world, Swixes of the world, et cetera. Simon Willison, I can go on and on. There's just some fantastic people there, Sebastian Rachka and so forth. When you engage with that content, you get fed more of that content back, and it's like a shortcut towards what's the hot paper, what's the hot concept.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite ways to learn.
I mean, same, like, I think I stopped using all the other social media, and not because of whatever like controversy or political views. It's simply a lot of smart people use it. And when I just like read all these technology that's coming out and papers coming out, I'm like, it's just so mesmerizing. I literally cannot go to sleep. Feeling so excited at like 2 a.m. Like, oh my God, I can't go to sleep. I usually go to sleep at like 4 a.m. just because I'm too wired up at that point.
I would say it really helps when, your work is your hobby. So I think another, simple tip to be a successful chief AI officer is if AI is your hobby, you already have a head start.
Yeah. Kind of curious, like, I think you mentioned this earlier too. You, I think, see yourself, it seems like your family is an early adopter in general sense. And, being an early adopter was almost like I say an edge, or you can kind of have a sneak peek into the future of what's to come. And usually people are like, well, you're a geek, you're doing something. Like, I was always that person. But now with AI, like, if I don't pay attention to your point around like X for a couple of days, I feel like I'm falling behind.
Absolutely.
So like, how do you do you think, like, how do you harness your power of being an early adopter to keep up with what's happening? But also, like, I feel like even my rate is getting slowed down because the world is moving so quickly. How do you kind of wrap your head around that?
There's no easy answer there. I can only say that I've been guilty in the past of being too early an adopter of technologies. So it could have been client server, could have been cloud, could have been blockchain even and stuff like that. That's not the case with AI, right? I can't be early enough. It's just, it's a technology that is truly on this, exponential self-improvement curve right now, the very steep part of the exponential. And the only way to go is like a straight line up right now. There's not much curve to the line anymore. So I've kind of philosophically said, okay, I can't stay on top of all of it all the time. Like everything else, you got to specialize. So I'm just picking, obviously, things I'm interested in, which is infrastructure, storage, and memory infrastructure, and watching the science, watching the models be much more infrastructure aware. Certainly keeping on top of all the cool inference server innovations that are leveraging infrastructure, that are making some of the, I'm obsessed when I used to be a CEO at a startup with cash flow. And so the cash flow is involved in these businesses now are insane. There's just no other way to describe it. And they're very true. They're on a knife's edge. Even Dario on the Dwarkesh podcast the other week said, it's literally all about cash flow, because we could spend an enormous amount of money to meet the demand we're seeing, but we could also bankrupt ourselves if we're off by like 1 degree of progress or whatever. So it really is a cash flow game, and focusing on that kind of grounds me.
Yeah. Kind of demand prediction that you kind of talked about in the podcast around like gross margin.
Exactly.
The amount of R&D that has to go in this year versus the gross margin they get next year. So kind of predicting that if they're off by a little bit, they can go a little bit bankrupt while they're successful. That was kind of crazy.
It's really a knife's edge that these businesses are running on.
Yeah, I was sitting next to a gentleman on one of the business trips, and he was deep into the data center space and really building out, tier 2, tier 3 regions. And I was asking, like, how much does it take to, if I want to, fund or join one of these like projects, like, it's like, the minimum check size is like $100 million.
Keep hearing that over and over again. It's like, that's when you're serious in AI. So,
And that's like the minimum entry barrier to check size. I'm like, wow, this is like crazy. And more than half of the all commercial buildings today are data centers. So it's kind of mind boggling, the world we're headed. Kind of you're curious to hear about your thoughts on Anthropic and OpenAI and around context management too, because I think this might be a general perception. I haven't really like tested or benchmarked against it. I think so far context convection happens slightly better with Codex versus Claude, is what I've been hearing from the development community. So people like to use Codex for a bit more complicated, comprehensive projects, where Anthropic is a little more snappy, quick.
Yeah.
So if you want fast iteration, so I think that's why Codex also came up with Codex Spark. And But Anthropic, from revenue perspective, they went from whatever billion to 14 billion. And I think they're faster slope on a sharper slope than OpenAI. OpenAI, I think, ended around 20 billion. So there's some questions around maybe Anthropic will overtake OpenAI in terms of revenue because they're focused on B2B enterprise. But also, I think you had some opinions around Anthropic. Are they really winning or are they in a losing streak? I'd love to kind of get your perspective on maybe those two companies.
Yeah.
If you want to throw in Gemini 3.1,
sure.
Hear about that too.
How much time do we have? It's such a fun topic. So much drama filled. In fact, you probably saw this, right? The big India AI summit this week. You saw that they had Dario and and Sam on stage. Not sure why they got placed next to each other. I think they weren't too pleased with that, but they wouldn't even hold hands, right?
Yeah.
So there is a lot of, let's just call it bad blood between those folks and a lot of drama there. Focusing on each one, they are very different companies. And, you can just label OpenAI as more of a consumer company and Anthropic as more of an enterprise company, but that's too simplistic a set of labels. As you said, we're seeing that some of these models, if not all of them, like Gemini Pro 3.1, right, continue to leapfrog each other at the frontier. Yeah. If anything, these models are converging more and more in terms of their benchmark capabilities. So it comes back to this intangible of taste. A lot of people say, I like the personality of an Opus or a Sonnet, particularly like in an OpenClaw environment, more than I like the personality of a Codex, even though to your point, if I give Codex a hard problem, it'll solve it accurately and faster more often than Opus or Sonnet will solve it accurately and faster. So it's interesting. Some of these intangibles now are becoming differentiators. The one thing that obsesses me a little bit about the difference between the companies is, again, OpenAI, Sam himself, just master lobbyist, master deal maker, visionary for sure. And just so much experience, right, in terms of just business experience with his YC background. Whereas Anthropic is so mission focused, to a fault. Very mission focused. The legendary Dario essays inside the company, the ones he publishes outside the company as well. The culture of Anthropic is a very, very unique culture. One anecdote I'll use Chatham House rules. I want to attribute this to a particular individual is that almost everyone at Anthropic doesn't have a 401k plan because they firmly believe that money will be worthless by the time they retire. They really believe in the deflationary value of AI when executed. Their goal, by the way, at Anthropic and even at OpenAI, but again, it's more of a core mission at Anthropic, is superintelligence. And these 10x revenue bumps into the tens of billions of dollars annually now are merely stepping stones along the way to that mission. But they are really focused on that mission. And they're glad they can fund this mission with Claude Code, Claude Cowork, et cetera. Whereas OpenAI seems to be just more of a commercial company. They just want to apply AI to our lives, at home, at work, and be part of sovereign AI configurations all over the world. Opportunistically, of course, partner with NVIDIA and others. So it's very different cultures at these two different companies with some brilliant machine learning scientists at both. So,
wow. I did not know about that 401k, but that's like fascinating. It's like a very opinionated view of the world.
Consistent. If you really do believe in superintelligence, it's not coming 10 years from now. It's coming like in a year or two. And what does that mean for, just to overemphasize it or over-dramatize it, free labor?
Wow.
Right?
I think I had that big realization at the end of last year when, I was spending the last half of December just playing with Claude Code. And this was around the time when a lot of people kind of switched their views to. Before it's like, well, it's AI slop. You can't really use this in production. So it's like, wait, this is like actually happening. I think even Andre Caparte and a few other folks really jumped that bandwagon. It's like, you know what? Now how we used to engineer has to fundamentally shift. And it's like using Claude Code for like 16 hours a day, literally. My wife was like looking at me like, are you a crazy teenager? Was it addicted to games?
It's like a game. Yeah, it's like our first video game experiences.
I was a professional gamer. So like I did a fair bit of my gaming. I was like, this is way more fun and addicting. So as the joke goes, instead of having 4 to 5 unfinished side projects, now I have 20 unfinished side projects.
Exactly.
And I'm just trying to release a few more open source projects at this moment. But speaking of now, what's a really interesting thing that's happening in our company too is we encourage people to use AI. And I actually recommended a couple of people on the business side to use Claude Code. And people are like, well, I don't have a background in engineering. Like, why should I code? It's like, no, just give it a try. You'll be surprised. Now we have like marketing team built their own marketing tools that tracks whatever projects they have like so many apps that they built. So now I get marketing teams sending me links. It's not to Google Docs or slides. It's to like for sale apps and stuff.
Exactly.
It's crazy what's happening. So what do you think about like this whole SaaS apocalypse? Like, is SaaS really ending? I think where market might be overreacting, but maybe that's true.
Yeah.
Where are you on this?
Yeah, I love that question. I'm trying to remember that quote, right? The market measures measures like weight in short term, and just measures like overall impact.
Voting machine and
exactly.
weighing machine over the long term.
That's the quote. That's what's happening right now. But I don't think the market's wrong, right? Because the valuation of SaaS companies was based on growth. So is SaaS worthless? Of course not. Are their systems of records worthless? Of course not. There's enormous value there. Mainframes, are still around. And I think that's the analogy here, is that the air has come out of the growth balloon for SaaS. If I were to generalize, there's always going to be some SaaS companies that are more successful than others. But look at public information like ServiceNow, a great SaaS company, with big deals with both Anthropic and OpenAI publicly announced. So the value layer, the growth layer, is AI now. And yes, we know, ServiceNow, for example, was successful. I think there was this like Vancouver codename release just after ChatGPT where really valuable, service agents were released by them and well accepted in the marketplace. They've concluded, though, this is just not like a treadmill they can really be on anymore. The capital expense alone required, much less the recruitment to recruit these top researchers, means that it's as Bill Gorey likes to say in his podcast, it's a sport of kings. And so I think we're going to see this trend where the growth for SaaS is in partnership with AI companies that have proven, like Claude Cowork or just Claude for PowerPoint, Excel, so super valuable. Those partnerships are definitely the trend going forward right now. The growth is in those areas. I've got a prediction I put on LinkedIn the other week, which is ultimately the most durable business model in this era of AI, software business model, is selling tokens. So I believe if not the top SaaS companies and the top neoclouds, the mid-tier or the smaller SaaS companies and neoclouds are going to merge out of necessity. Because if you really want to extract value, it's going to be less and less in prepackaged software. This is like one of Jensen's public statements as well. Most software is becoming inferred now as opposed to precompiled and run. And that requires tokens. And the tokens, of course, require infrastructure and data centers.
So maybe picking one company, for example, like Salesforce, since you mentioned system of records, will Salesforce still be relevant, assuming we figure out memory? We get this AI super intelligence and all the memories like, hey, I'm just going to feed you data, dump you through APIs or MCPs or whatever, or just email you all my interaction with customers on those Zoom calls, con calls, whatever. You tell me which customer I need to talk to. You tell me where we headed, what's our forecast. I have a set of questions I want to get reported on every weekly because I still am a human. I got to talk to other executives. But I don't want to deal with a clunky UI that has a million buttons and fields that are Salesforce hygiene is an issue. I want the AI to tell our sales rep to fill them out or make best guesses and course correct later. I'm like, do I need a Salesforce when we have a perfect memory and a smart AI?
Yeah, I think you do. I mean, this is again why strategy is so important in this era, and getting strategy right is so important. Again, I'm going to go back to the tired mainframe analogy because it works, right? COBOL and mainframes haven't gone away. It's still the fundamental financial system of record. We've tried to replace it for decades. We haven't been able to. People who wrote the code are dying literally right now, and we're using AI to try and maintain it. So SaaS, I believe, for foreseeable future, let's say end of the decade, will absolutely remain the single source of truth, but not the active source of truth, right? The active source of truth already is being pulled by agents into markdown files and other kinds of agent working memory. And as we discussed earlier, will end up ultimately pre-filled once, hopefully, and then decoded forever. So that decoded system of record in large KV cache token warehouses will become the new active, system of record. And where the value is there, it'll be companies that operate at that native, decode only performance, that post-embedded KV cache level of performance. Those will be the most successful companies because they'll literally be able to react in real time, be able to always have current information, always have the AI version of the closed books every minute, every hour, not just once a quarter. That, I think, will be how this evolves for the next few years. And it's possible that people will start to really question, why am I paying for last decade's system of record if these AI systems now, after a few years, have proven to just work?
Yeah. let's finish it off with what we call the human prompt. Basically, we like to end each of our episode on a more personal note to uncover our guest's human prompt. So what it is let's assume you had this access to this ultimate, all-knowing, omniscient Gen AI model, free of no hallucinations, no privacy concerns, used to make something very easier or better for your personal life. What would be the one sentence prompt you want to ask this amazing, omnipotent, omniscient AI agent?
Can it be a run-on sentence?
Can be more descriptive, like you can structure it, markdown file maybe.
Right. It would be something around the fact that you absolutely have to respect like Asimov's 3 rules for robots, right? You cannot harm a human. You cannot be tricked into harming a human and so forth. I am getting increasingly concerned about the power of these models and the fact that our safety is really an issue right now, where it was more conceptual a year or 2 ago. The exponential progress is real. And in that, again, I'm going to go back to Star Trek and like the Gene Roddenberry vision of the future, where it's not just about capitalism. It's really just about senses of purpose, and obviously a very inclusive type of multiracial, species society and so forth. I just like that vision of the future, right? It's very utopian, and I'm realistic, right? We don't live in a utopian world, but we have to guide AI towards that kind of world, and we have to create, it's always about incentives. We have to create incentives for AI to help us get there, and we have to have some basic safety rules as well. So run-on sentence for sure. I would compress that. I would refine with my favorite, chatbot that into be my system prompt.
Wow. You want to use your human prompt to make human society better.
Oh, yeah.
I love that.
Oh, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope the audience learned a lot. So it's a very interesting conversation. And I'm really hugely interested in what WEKA is building around memory. We talk a lot about memory at our company. So really keen on potentially partnering from a business perspective too, but really can't wait to see what you're up next.
I'd really look forward to that, John. Yeah, I really enjoyed this conversation, love this facility, and hopefully I can come back again and we can discuss all the great updates of the industry.
Sounds good. All right, thanks so much.
You're welcome.